Oggi Motocross My Passion è qua nel paese dei Balocchi, siamo sulla pista di Dorno per la presentazione delle moto Yamaha. Siamo qua col 450, sono qua con Luca Lussana di Yamaha Motor Italia. Ciao Luca.
Ciao a tutti.
E con un carissimo amico che farà da tester per questa prova delle moto Yamaha 450 e 250, il grande Fabio Mussini. Ciao Fabio.
Ciao Adriano e ciao Luca, ciao a tutti.
E benvenuto su Motocross My Passion. Avremo un po' di lavoro da fare nelle prossime settimane, spero nella tua disponibilità e nella tua sensibilità nel provare le moto. Cosa dire? Yamaha 450 YZF 2019, cosa è cambiato dal 2018? Le parti più importanti?
Allora, diciamo che la moto è stata veramente rinnovata completamente nel 2018. In questo 2019 sono stati fatti degli ulteriori passi di affinamento, quindi abbiamo le tarature delle sospensioni, la mappatura centralina, le nuove grafiche che distinguono la moto 2019 e di conseguenza questi piccoli affinamenti che Yamaha tutti gli anni fa su ogni modello per andare sempre a migliorare dove si può, insomma.
Rimane l'avviamento elettrico, sì. Rimane la possibilità di utilizzare l'applicazione con lo smartphone per cambiare le mappature, sì, cosa molto importante e che ha avuto molto successo.
Sì, è un semplice sistema, il Power Tuner, per poter settare la mappatura motore, e è molto apprezzato perché è facile da usare, non comporta particolari investimenti, di conseguenza è a portata di tutti.
Fabio, diamo un consiglio a tutti gli appassionati: cercate di non smanettare più di tanto con questa applicazione perché si possono fare dei danni incommensurabili.
No, sicuramente credo sia una buona opportunità per l'utente di personalizzare la moto. Chiaramente credo che vada un po' conosciuto e sapere dove andare a mettere mano. Poi che sia un giochino, e oggi la tecnologia ci permette di affinare, avvicinarci sempre di più a questi aspetti, però credo vadano un po' conosciute le aspettative e le caratteristiche di questa funzione, sicuramente molto vantaggiosa.
Abbiamo fatto un giro appunto fuori onda, controllavamo un po' i particolari, Fabio, della moto. Cosa ti colpisce a livello statico?
Sicuramente Yamaha ha fatto un ottimo lavoro sullo sviluppo. Sono curioso di provare a vedere questi nuovi interventi. È una moto che non provo da vari anni, quindi sicuramente potrò notare questi cambiamenti. Così visivamente si nota una moto molto snella, molto sottile la parte della sella e sulle pedane. Sono curioso, proviamo a fare qualche giro e poi vi daremo qualche informazione.
Bene, allora io chiudo qua questa piccola clip, mandiamo Fabio a divertirsi un po' sulla pista di Dorno.
Assolutamente, pronti?
Via!
Welcome to MXA's first ride video of the 2019 Yamaha YZ450F. For 2019, Yamaha only made a few updates to its YZ450F, although credit should be given to the 2018 Yamaha YZ450F for being totally new. But the list of updates for 2019 is short. It consists of updated Yamaha SSS suspension valving, more rigid fork lugs, stiffer wheel collars, less drag on the electric starter system, denser seafoam, and a blue valve cover. So we were surprised to discover that this meager list of changes actually improved the 2019 YZ450F way beyond our expectations. Every MXA test rider loves Yamaha's SSS suspension. We applaud Yamaha for finding something that works and sticking with it. There are no drastic changes to the Yamaha SSS suspension for 2019, just a little tweaking. Some new valves and a stiffer shim stack. Those tweaks do wonders for the YZ450F. The forks stay higher in their stroke, especially under heavy braking, yet feel plush when they move. They don't blow through, and the mid-stroke they seem to be plush. These are perfect coil spring forks. They follow the ground, don't dive excessively, resist bottoming, and, most of all, work for everyone from novices to vets to AMA pros. You wouldn't think we would bring attention to the updated wheel collars. We don't know how big a part the wheel collars play in the relationships to the stouter axle lugs, thicker wall diameter of the front axle, or the new fork valving. But we do know that the 2019 Yamaha YZ450F tracks better, holds the line perfectly, increases front wheel traction, lessens bump steer and the braking bumps, and gives the chassis a sense of purpose that wasn't there in 2018. Only the brake rotor side front wheel spacer is more rigid, courtesy of a 5mm wider shoulder. Both rear wheel spacers are beefed up. If you're asking yourself why Seafoam makes the list for 2019 changes, remove the seat from a 2018-19 YZ450F and look at it closely. It is basically a thin plastic base of about 1 inch of foam on it. It has the least foam of any modern motocross bike made. The 2018 foam was not only thin, it was spongy. When YZ450F riders landed from jumps, they didn't just land on the Yamaha seat, they landed on the subframe. For 2019, Yamaha switched to a 16% denser foam. Not necessarily thicker foam, but a firmer foam that is less likely to collapse when 200 pounds of airborne rider land on it. The 2018-19 YZ450F engine package is a major step up from the older 2017 power band, not just on the dyno. The old engine made a little more power from 5,000 RPM to 8,000 RPM, while the new engine was better from 8,000 RPM to 11,000 RPM. Peak power was 57.55 horsepower and 9,700 RPM. We described the 2019 power band and its 2018 cousin as having been filled in. Instead of the dead spot in the middle that broke the 2017 YZ450F power band into two distinct power bands, the new engine has one long usable power band. We were happy with the YZ450F power, but felt that we could improve it with 3 simple changes. Number 1, gearing. We switched the stock 48-tooth rear sprocket for 49. Gearing it down lessened the workload on second gear by moving third gear closer. 2, mapping. We don't like the stock YZ450F map. It felt lean and a little flat down low. We used the same Travis Preston map as we did last year. This Preston map made as much as 2 more horsepower while torque was up 0.90 foot-pounds. Number 3, the air filter. We aren't fond of the 2019 YZ450F airbox and air filter design. Yamaha used a flat piece of foam that lays on top of the backfire screen. Every time the engine pulses, which can be 10,000 times per minute, the air filter vibrates against the wire screen. This constant pulsing and suction dries up the air filter oil and eventually sucks dirt through the dry spot in the foam. The quick fix is to run a twin air YZ450F air filter, which offers a much thicker foam plus a plug-in spacer that lifts the twin air filter off the backfire screen to lessen the repetitive pounding against the screen. $9,299 2019 Yamaha YZ450F is a better package. Yamaha managed to make some significant improvements on its previously loose chassis setup with better suspension, more rigidity in the steering axis, a broader power band, and better gearing. This isn't one of our favorite chassis. It has some quirks in the steering response that put a hitch in its step. It doesn't help that the 2019 YZ450F weighs 239 pounds. We are embarrassed to say that even at that weight, it isn't the heaviest 450 on the starting line. There are 2 bikes, the Sierra 450 and RMZ 450, that weigh more. Bulk is the biggest hindrance to the 2019 YZ450F being considered an excellent handling machine. It is tall and wide. Even if it is lower and narrower than it was in 2017, it feels big and bulky, and riders have to either finesse it or muscle it. There isn't an in-between that suits most riders. If you push it hard, it will fight you in the corners, and if you try to glide it, it won't be fast. There's only so much that axle lugs and wheel collars can do to change the personality of a bike with character flaws. To see the full test on the 2019 Yamaha YZ450F, pick up the October issue of Motocross Action Mag. As always, check out motocrossactionmag.com for all the 2019 bike releases, product updates, and race results.
Ed ecco Fabio che si appresta a provare il 450 2019, farà ancora una manche e poi ci rivediamo per un briefing delle prime sensazioni. Divertiti! Ed eccoci arrivati, prova della 450 2019 Yamaha YZF. Fabio, mi sembrava che tu volassi sulle wave, le facevi 2 alla volta, incredibile, gran bella guida. Prime impressioni?
Ma sicuramente moto molto potente, dopo passare da un 250 e immediatamente a un 450 la potenza si fa sentire, come probabilmente potrebbe essere il contrario, passare su un 250 e dici cavolo, la moto non va. E parlando nei dettagli, sono riuscito ad avere un buon feeling quando ho messo la mappa numero 2, e non in quanto a potenza, ma personalmente ha una facilità di guida su tutte le aree, staccata, ingresso curva, progressioni di accelerazione in fuori dalle curve, mentre la mappa 1 molto freno motore, dove mette in evidenza, fa sentire molto il peso della moto, mentre con la mappatura 2 la moto cambia totalmente, hai molto più fluidità, meno inerzia, e questo permette una maggior fluidità di guida. E quindi... si parlava
prima del freno motore, che era un pochettino invasivo sul 250, sul 450 come l'hai trovato?
Questo stavo dicendo, che la mappa 2 diciamo lo elimina, la moto diventa molto più maneggevole e molto più fluida, mentre la mappa 1 mi metteva un po' più in crisi, come ho detto prima, in tutte le circostanze, in tutte le aree, in tutti i dettagli del circuito, mettendo la moto un po' più nervosa. A livello di ciclistica, rispetto al 2,5 ho sentito la moto un po' più bassa dietro, credo anche un po' la sensazione della sella. Questa è una moto un po' più usata da quello che vedo, e la sella è un po' più morbida, comunque sì, l'effetto di avere la moto un po' più seduta dietro. E un'altra cosa che ho sentito, notato, l'offset da 25, che sì, dà un po' più di stabilità sul veloce, ma se devo in curva non mi ha fatto impazzire, come se a un certo punto in ingresso curva e centro curva ci fosse un po' una resistenza tra il dentro e il fuori.
Scusa se ti interrompo, diciamo che praticamente non abbiamo controllato il sag dietro l'altezza, la moto è completamente standard, per cui con piccoli accorgimenti sicuramente questo si può modificare.
Sicuramente stiamo provando delle moto standard, non so nemmeno le regolazioni delle sospensioni, stiamo facendo un test d'impatto e quindi esprimendo un po' le prime sensazioni dopo averle provate.
Sicuramente faremo un test molto più approfondito e molto più particolare a livello tecnico quando ci verranno consegnate le moto da poter tenere qualche giorno. Per cui intanto ti ringrazio Fabio, poi facciamo due chiacchiere un pochettino su quello che fai e su quello che hai fatto in questo meraviglioso mondo. Per cui a fra poco.
Hey, this is Michael Lindsay from Vital MX. We're out here at Polo Raceway today riding the 2019 Yamaha YZ450F. ...2018 was a big year for Yamaha, launching almost an entirely new platform. So as you can imagine, the 19 is just touching on and kind of modifying and fixing a few little comments based off the 18. So going into shootout last year, a lot of guys were really impressed with the 18 Yamaha. They felt like they made really big gains in the chassis department and even the bodywork, finally really working on the airbox to get the plastic from being, I believe it's convex, where it gets wide early and then tapers back, to concave, where it bows in and then out, getting, by rolling those radiator forwards and changing the whole front of the bike, to finally feeling like you could get up front and it didn't feel so foreign compared to a lot of the air bikes in the class. But some of the comments that were negative about the 18 were just little things. The bike was so all new, it just felt like there was a couple little key areas that had gone missed on. One of them was the suspension. The Yamaha was extremely plush, so comfortable, but the 18 was almost a little too busy. The fork and shock were so soft, it felt like the bike was teetering a little bit coming to the corners. The fork would go down, it'd get fast rebound, kind of pop back up, the rear would sink, and by the time you got to the rut, the bike was still trying to figure out how it wanted to settle. It made it a little bit hard to really charge in deep and roll from the entrance to the middle. It felt like you were getting off the throttle early and really trying to get the bike to be composed when it entered. For 19, they've gone to a much stiffer compression valve stack. All the spring rates are the same, but the goal is to keep the bike a little bit up more in the stroke and try to keep the balance maintained, give it a more racy feel, not like a cushy plush couch. Still trying to keep the comfort, but just really trying to make the bike feel more precise. A few of the air changes, which this is going to sound small, but ended up being fairly noticeable, was with the bottom of the front forks. The lugs and the wheel spacers are changed a bit. The lug has more surface area where the spacers contact it. The material is quite a bit thicker. It's got different ridges, and the idea is to keep more stability at the axle. So when you're going in under heavy braking loads and entering the corner, the front end doesn't feel like it twists as much. All this was quite noticeable on the track. Today at Paul, we had a lot of really deep, soft, kind of like slosh, muddy ruts. And it was areas where you were on the throttle deep into the section because of the material being so soft. And normally with that material, you would feel the front flex and start to grab. We got to ride the 18 and then the 19 was just so much more composed in these situations. Engine-wise, we all know the Yamaha is fantastic in this department. Pretty much everybody has said this the last few years. And what they've really been playing around is what do they do with that power? Over the past couple years, they've changed the gearing, really going to smaller rear sprockets, trying to spread out that power and make it more manageable and usable. But I felt like with the 18 and 17, they'd almost gone too far. They had spread it out so much that it made the bike almost hard for me to ride in second gear on tired tracks because it was so low RPM in the corners. The bike was coming off from a complete dead feel right into the hit of the power, and it was just making it a little bit lurchy. It was kind of, it felt like it was gonna stall really easy. So for me, I was always on the clutch, which I don't prefer to do. A really easy change is gearing, and they finally did that. They went one tooth up this year, and I feel like it's a really good base point. Some guys still might want to add another tooth to really kind of change the gearing to more what the other bikes feel like, using up second, third, and getting into fourth a little more normally. But by going from a 48 to a 49 tooth, I feel like they've done a really good range. For the guys that don't want to shift a lot, want that real spread of power, it's still there, but at the same time, it's getting through the gears a little bit quicker. It's making second more usable in the tight stuff, off the clutch. Third, you can run the range, and you can actually get up on fourth on some of these faster tracks. Another minor call out that ended up making a fairly substantial difference is seat foam. I've been telling a lot of people this year, if you have an 18YZ, to buy some stiffer seat foam. I think most of the media outlets called it out in their shootout last year, and it was just a little too soft. And although the bike felt so much skinnier to stand on, we had a lot of our test riders commenting that when they sat in the corners, man, the bike still feels big and cushy, something's weird. And the foam was so soft and their seat was so thin now, you were getting through the foam into the base, and especially if you're kind of on top of the bike in the corner, the seat foam itself was squishing out and it was making it feel wider under your hips than it should. So they went quite a bit stiffer on the foam this year. It holds its shape. It's a lot more supportive on the body, and it makes it a lot more comfortable in the corner sitting. It makes you feel more precise with the bike. There's less kind of energy loss between you and the bike where you don't feel like what's going on in the corner. You get more of that transfer of information coming from the bike, which really improves how you roll through the middle of the corners. Considering the list of changes was somewhat minor, we got our riding in, kind of went back and forth between the bikes, felt the differences, and from there we still really wanted to learn more. So Yamaha worked with us on their Power Tuner app, something they're really trying to push because they're the only manufacturer on the market with it. It's an app for your phone, whether you have Apple or Android. It's free to download. It connects right to your bike. You just press the starter button. The bike's active for 2 minutes at a time. Every time you press the button, it refreshes. And you have the ability to make so many changes. A 450 has so much power. There's so many ways to manipulate for what you want. So for like me, I got on the bike and it was like, hey, second gear is a little too much initially. Made a quick change on the phone that literally took a minute. Really got a map that was a little bit more linear initially and then started to build more progressively. It made it for me to come out of the corner to get on the throttle harder and be able to carry through that motion instead of it being punchy and then having to let off and get back into it. And then from there I came in, I was like, hey, I'd like to try something with a little less engine braking. Once again, a couple little numbers, clicked in a few things, and we were able to free up how the engine feels, roll the Yamaha through the middle and kind of make the bike even not just the engine characteristic, but also change the handling characteristic because of this. And what's really fun is the Power Tuner is so simple. The little graph's really easy to understand, and you really can't mess anything up in the sense that all the base maps are saved. You can go +5 here, +4 there, go out, ride it. Doesn't do what you want, come back, go the other direction. It's just kind of like learning with suspension. It's a little daunting at first, but if you just plug it in and start playing with it, you can really learn a lot and take an already really good bike and mold it to what you want without spending any extra money at all. Checklist: excellent engine, great chassis comfort, great suspension comfort, improved ergonomics. I'd say overall the bike just feels more racy this year. Doesn't feel like the couch that it was last year. Between the suspension setting changes, the ergonomics of the bike, the overall couple little adjustments they made with the fork for the chassis feel, the bike is just so much more precise, but it still retains that excellent suspension comfort that Yamahas are known for. All the power, the ability to adjust it for free. It's a pretty solid choice when you really look at it.
La prima manche con la nuova YZF 250 2019, grande divertimento Fabio.
Sì, è una moto molto facile, si apprezza la sua maneggevolezza che ha e anche la percorrenza in ingresso di curva. Le due mappature si sente notevolmente la differenza tra l'1 e 2, che è la mappatura standard e quella la 2 che è un po' più power, ha più potenza e ha una buona erogazione sino a metà, però poi nell'estensione della marcia vuole data la marcia e a un certo punto il numero di giri mura un po', però non devi insistere tanto con la marcia, butti il cambio e prende forza e velocità. Positivo il rapporto che c'è, la triangolatura con le pedane manubrio-sella, si riesce a stringere bene tra le ginocchia e permette di ritardare la seduta ingresso in curva, ha un buon bilanciamento e devo dire che le sensazioni sono state molto buone.
Ottimo, intanto adesso ti riposi un pochettino, facciamo un pochettino un briefing su quello che sono state le tue sensazioni in pista e poi ritorneremo in pista per alcuni giri.
Volevo ovviamente non tralasciare il discorso sospensioni, che mi è piaciuto molto l'impatto dei salti in atterraggio, ha un buon comfort e è un po' nelle buche in successione, in uscita di curva, anche in staccata non c'è tanta progressione, la forcella in staccata perde un po' rapidamente la progressione e dà l'idea un po' che vada a lavorare sulla parte dura, però quello credo proprio sia un discorso di regolazioni, e anche il dietro in fase di accelerazione sta un po' sopra le buche, però a parte questo la sensazione è buona.
Ho visto che nella serie di Waves praticamente con le buche in sequenza, ma lunghe e tante correzioni con il corpo.
Sì, in quelle situazioni sicuramente bisogna essere plastici e seguire la moto. Come dicevo prima, in quella situazione, in quella circostanza, col cambio basta buttare una marcia in più e lei si adatta, ovviamente non devi chiudere il gas in quelle circostanze. Però è una buona sensazione, sì.
Bene, adesso andiamo, facciamo una piccola pausa e ritorniamo subito da voi. Adesso siamo curiosi di sentire le prime impressioni che riversi su Luca Lussana dopo la prova del 250 2019.
Sì, sentiamo un po' cosa ci dice, sono molto interessato a capire come l'hai trovata.
No, come dicevo prima, Yamaha è una moto che già da anni non guidavo, e le sensazioni sulla nuova 250 sono buone. La moto ha fatto uno step direi molto evidente, ciclisticamente è molto facile, ha un ottimo ingresso e percorrenza di curva, è molto lineare. Mi è piaciuta la triangolatura tra sella, pedana e manubrio, e forse un pelino di freno motore, però quello lo correggi un po' mantenendo il filino di gas, ma la differenza delle due mappature si nota tra la prima standard e la seconda, che è più potente. Ugualmente a un certo numero di giri, a metà vuol data la marcia, e poi forse a livello di sospensioni ho notato un po' l'anteriore, forse per me un po' morbido, da un buon assetto, però alle alte velocità in staccata perde un po' e va a lavorare un po' sulla parte bassa, però è una questione credo poi di intervento e di soluzione, di personalizzazione.
Considera che noi qua facciamo provare le moto nella versione proprio standard per dare un'effettiva impressione ai clienti che la provano. Chiaramente da qui ci sono poi tutti i range di correzione per potersi personalizzare il setting e ottimizzarlo in base a guida, peso e caratteristiche.
Hai visto anche tu che io l'unico intervento che ho fatto è stato sollevare un po' la leva del freno anteriore e non ho toccato né manubrio né freno posteriore né leva del cambio, non ho controllato nemmeno il negativo dell'ammortizzatore. Sicuramente personalizzando, adeguando un po' la moto si vedono poi, uno va a migliorarsela, diciamo, però devo dire che l'impressione è stata molto positiva.
Bene, bene, questo ci fa piacere perché ogni anno Yamaha lavora per sviluppare, sono piccoli passi ma vengono fatti ogni anno e ogni anno devo dire che abbiamo dei feedback positivi perché chi già le guidava sente questi step e chi non le aveva mai guidate li apprezza il bilanciamento generale. Ecco.
Bene, non vedo l'ora di averla io tra le mani per qualche giorno e se riuscirò ad andare solamente alla metà di quello che ha fatto vedere Fabio sarei già molto ma molto contento.
Un'altra cosa che ci tenevo a dire è che nei modelli precedenti si notava molto il rumore della cassetta filtro di questo airbox e non ho notato questa grande rumorosità che c'era nei modelli di qualche anno fa, ripeto, perché io credo che l'ultimo modello sia stato nel 2014, quindi sono stati parecchi anni, però questo rumore che avevi di aspirazione sotto la sella diciamo, sulla parte lì non si nota più e noti più il rumore del motore allo scarico, sì. E questa direi che è una cosa che un po' infastidiva. E adesso...
Sì, si è lavorato anche in questo senso, tant'è vero che come dici è diminuito parecchio perché era un po' una caratteristica dei primi modelli, adesso sugli ultimi modelli si sono fatti degli interventi e quest'ultimo è quello che ne ha beneficiato maggiormente. Sicuramente è un'osservazione molto attenta.
E queste sono le prime osservazioni a caldo da parte di Fabio Mussini e di Luca Lussana sulla nuova YZF 250 2019.
Hey, this is Michael Lindsay from Vital MX. We're out at the newly dubbed Fox Raceway riding the 2019 Yamaha YZ250F. For 2019, Yamaha has brought in a huge host of improvements for their 250F, starting from the most obvious are the same improvements we saw on last year's 450 from them, which is an all-new chassis and bodywork. The chassis is actually a pretty big change for them. Of course, you can overall see that the angles of all the frame spars have changed, and what they've done is, they mentioned, is trying to improve the triangulation of the frame, the points at which everything turns is more even now. There isn't as many dips or there isn't as many close points in the frames, and what this does is allow the force to be more evenly spread throughout the frame. Everything experienced from the engine to the input of the bike, it just makes it a little bit easier for them to balance the rigidity of the frame. This allows them, of course, to improve cornering, straight line stability, just kind of the whole overall mixture of what you're looking for from a good bike. As for the bodywork, the most major change is up in the front of the bike. Everybody's been talking about for years how their radiator shrouds feel so big, and part of that was not that they were too big at the maximum point, it was more in the middle. They were concave, where the shrouds grew quickly and then tapered off to their final width, where the new ones are convex. They start skinny and then they bow out late. They've done this by moving the radiators forward, changing the whole airbox layout, and this is really a huge improvement to get around the bike. Especially that all matches in with a new seat profile that is lower, both in the saddle and in the end. Saddle's like 9 millimeters at the rear of the bike, it's 18 to almost 20 millimeters. And then the side plates themselves and the exhaust have been repositioned, reshaped to make it easier to get back on the bike. All this really ties into a bike that has a much more wider characteristic, which we'll get into in a second, because that also adds into what they've done with the engine. As we've all said for quite a few years now, the YZ250F is the king of torque in the 250 class. It's even been dubbed a mini 450. It's really easy to ride a gear high, which helps the suspension work better, and it just makes the bike feel overall very comfortable. But it doesn't have quite the high RPM characteristic of some of its competition, most notably the bike that's been flying the most in the shootout, the KTM. So they went back to work on the cylinder head this year. They've changed the exhaust angle out with the pipe. They already have that really steep intake angle. They're just trying to get all the flow in the head and back out quickly. They've got bigger cam buckets to run a higher lift, more aggressive cam, and they've also bumped up the compression ratio from 13.5:1 to 13.8:1. For the first couple laps, I actually mistaken the engine a little bit. It definitely makes a lot more in the mid to top end range and continues to pull farther, but it almost felt like it lost a little bit on the bottom. It actually makes around the same amount of torque. It's just a much more freer and snappier feeling characteristic. So instead of pulling, kind of feeling like it does this long flat pull from low to mid, it gets up and goes quicker as it hits the mid-range, goes to the top, and it allows you to get out and grab that next gear even quicker. So overall, I would say this is a big improvement adding this bit to the top. They're claiming around a change of maybe a horsepower and a half at that peak, and it really gives it what it needs to fight everything in the class. It's still, for me, the easiest bike to ride down low, ride that gear high, but it gives it that extra range up top to be ridden aggressively, which really matches in with all the suspension setting changes and the frame changes. The bike just feels a lot more knife's edge now. It feels a lot more precision, where the old bike was a little bit bigger, a little bit slower to react, but it was very comfortable and it had this real down low. It was a bike that was easy to ride lazy, but maybe took a little more work to ride hard and aggressive. The new bike balances that out much better. It gives you a 250F that really feels like it's ready at the top of the class to be able to use in any section any way you want. And of course, biggest thing everybody wonders about the Yamaha is that front end feel. Everybody's kind of argued the vagueness or the lack of maybe turn-in feel that they've had. The changes they made to the frame, to even the fork setting, the fork lugs, all the stuff they've done to try to improve that feedback to the rider have been really successful. And what I mean by that is, no, it doesn't turn in as quick as, say, a Suzuki or a Honda, but it has a lot more front end feel. And by the biggest way I noticed that is based on where I was sitting on the bike. I was actually sitting in the middle to rear of the bike on corner entrance way more than I did on the previous bike, where I always felt like I was getting right up on top of the airbox and trying to get that front end to plant coming in. Now it feels way more natural to sit in the middle of the bike, set up early, get that leg out, and let the bike roll into the corner. Like I said, it doesn't snap in as quick as some of their competition, but it's very competitive in, and the biggest improvement is how well it rolls to the middle. I always felt like the Yamahas, you'd come in really hard, and because the bike would tend to stand up or do weird things in the middle corner, it took a lot of momentum to get through the middle of the corner before you could get back on the throttle. The new bike can be rolled through the middle of the corner very simply, and I even feel like you can get on the throttle a lot earlier on the new setup because it'll actually stay leaned over and it carves the middle of the corner better. Suspension-wise, we're talking about all new components. We've got a little bit bigger damping rod and piston inside the fork. We've got a new shock body. Overall, the settings, definitely a little bit of just a stiffer bike. It feels a little bit more held up in the stroke, and it has more of an aggressive feel. It's just a little bit easier to push into the corners. It holds up more, but it's not too stiff. It still keeps that Yamaha / KYB plushness a lot of people have come to really expect from this manufacturer. When every year a lot of people definitely say the stock suspension on this bike is capable for most of the people that are going to buy it. And I think they've really done a good job there. I didn't honestly play much with the clicker setting today. I was playing with the balance. Because the front end feel is so much better on the new bike, I went from the recommended 100 millimeters of sag down to like 102, 103, just because I felt like I had enough front end grip that I wasn't needing that on the entrance. I'd rather settle the bike down and ride it off the back aggressively. The other two big key features to talk about here are the electric start. There's no more Kickstarter, it's electric start only, so it has all new engine cases built around this to make sure there wasn't much of a weight penalty when adding it to the bike. And then the other comes from the mapping side. Yamaha's been talking a lot about their Wi-Fi tuner app that's free to download. There's a couple different maps built into it. It's really easy to connect to your bike by Wi-Fi, play with all the mappings, log all of your hours on it, everything. But what's really cool about it is now they have a map switch up top and you can assign different maps from your phone to that. For the guys that maybe earlier heard me talk about how it feels like it revs up a little bit quicker and doesn't have quite that roll-on deepness of the old engine, there was actually a really quick way to fix that. Their aggressive map that I tried gives it a lot more of the characteristic of the old bike. When you roll it on, it has a lot deeper punch and it feels like it just hits earlier and has this pull more off the bottom. And then at the top end, it doesn't pull quite as aggressively, giving it kind of a mixture of the old to the new engine characteristics. So for the guys that are looking more for that 250 that feels like the Mini 450, you can definitely play with the mapping and get really that characteristic you're looking for. But for the guys that have been wanting the Yamaha to be more of a lightweight weapon, a little bit more nimble and have more of that aggressive power characteristic, I feel like they really nailed that with the 2019. Now, of course, with this bike, there's a ton to talk about. I'd love to list it all in this video, but for people that want a deeper impression, a little bit more info on each individual change, I'm gonna break that down in an audio file on our website under this video. So if you're on VitalMX.com, go ahead and scroll down. If you're on YouTube, hit the link below, it'll take you to our page. I'm gonna go through this, try to give you guys as much info as possible. We have shootout coming up, and I gotta say, I think the Yamaha has a really strong chance at taking the top spot back. We'll see here in just a couple short weeks.
Arrivati a fine giornata, a fine delle prove delle nuove Yamaha 2019, cosa dire, un grande ringraziamento a Fabio Mossini che si è prestato per questa prova, sempre professionale e sempre preciso nei commenti. Fabio, di qualcosa a tutti gli spettatori di Motocross My Passion in chiusura della giornata, poi noi avremo modo di fare due chiacchiere su quello che è stata la tua carriera in questo ambiente e se ti diverti ancora.
Ma innanzitutto, se devo dire qualcosa, di seguire Motocross My Passion. No, è stata una giornata positiva, tornare al motocross è sempre molto bello, il primo amore, e ho avuto modo di provare i nuovi modelli Yamaha, le nuove sensazioni, i nuovi interventi che la casa giapponese ha fatto. E è stato un piacere rivederti dopo tanto tempo e trascorrere per poter condividere un po' le nuove impressioni su questi modelli di moto.
Questa grande passione che ci accomuna, ricordiamo a tutti che Fabio Mossini è stato un grande campione, ci ha regalato delle pagine molto belle sia nel motocross che nell'enduro e anche alla Parigi-Dakar, se non sbaglio.
Sì, grazie per le tue belle parole. Sì, ho una carriera abbastanza lunga, devo dire di aver avuto la fortuna di fare questo bellissimo lavoro, passione, lavoro. L'esperienza da Dakar è stata solamente dal punto di vista assistenza e logistica con HRC, che comunque mi hanno fatto valutare alcune possibilità, poi la mia scelta ha preso altre strade, però sicuramente positiva, stare a fianco anche a quella di aver scoperto una nuova specialità dove va tutto il mio rispetto ai piloti che fanno la scelta di correre queste gare di motorelli. E niente, adesso siamo di nuovo qua, quindi facendo sempre quello che ci piace e lavorando per varie aziende.
Poi hai dei colori che a me piacciono molto, un marchio a cui sono legato proprio con il cuore, che è la Just One, con i nuovi completi, i nuovi caschi. Cosa dire? Complimenti Fabio e ci vediamo sicuramente alla prossima.
Grazie mille Adriano, un saluto a tutti gli appassionati e ci vediamo al prossimo appuntamento. Ciao!
Amici appassionati, ben ritrovati in Motocross My Passion con questo 16° round della Sono qua con un'icona del mondo dell'enduro, la tabella rossa di Antonio Cairoli. Inizio di stagione in attesa della seconda manche dell'MX2 2017, vince il quinto titolo mondiale, contraddistingue il 2-2-2 Antonio Cairoli. Benvenuto su Motocross My Passion.
A ninth title for Cairoli, who came home in second. Max Amsty came home.
E vi ricordo, Motocross My Passion c'è